So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution. Today I'm going to be answering Ask HR questions because I'm banned. I'm in part like 30 or something at this point. I go over pretty interesting questions from the Ask HR subreddit on Reddit, discuss them, give my point of view, and go from there. We got a question about why people hate HR in Florida. We've got a question about being fired in DC. And finally, we've got a person in New York who worries that they're blacklisted. Let's get right into it out of Florida. Question is, I'm curious why, if most companies hate HR. In my work as a consultant, almost every business owner, executive, etc., deal with absolutely hates anything HR related. And and the question is, why is that? So there's a couple things. There's a couple reasons. One, in my opinion, there are two types of HR people. There are the strategic HR, and then there are the party planning in HR. I characterize the party planning HR as the people who probably came up as like office assistants, maybe got a bachelor's degree, like to plan a bunch of parties and retirements and things like that, and then they like to get in people's business, be snoopy, gossip, things like that. So there's that piece, and I think that drives away a lot of people. They're clearly not business people. They're people that just sort of got promoted because the business maybe grew, and so they needed an HR person, and they said, okay, the front office person does it, and then it moved on from there. Strategic, people who went to school, have a vested interest in the business and have a vested interest in seeing the business succeed. Those people are a different breed, and I think they're a lot smaller than we honestly give people credit for. I think that group of HR people is fairly small, but I do think that they play a big role. And when you don't deal with one of them, I think you get a lot of hate. The other one is sort of interesting because it's because HR is the internal face for the company many times, and frankly, the worst of the company is often using HR to calculate different things. So what I mean by that, for example, is in my past lives, I had a manager who didn't want to deal with bad behavior from their employee. They Instead of managing the employee and then managing them out, they filed an ethics complaint with respect to time wasting, and then made HR run the ethics complaint and made HR look like the bad guy. Where frankly, the bad guy was the manager that let their employee live on for a long time without trying to correct them appropriately and without trying to do their due diligence or coach. And so ultimately, HR gets saddled with these duties because there's a lot of poor managers, and as a result, HR looks pretty bad. The other problem is that sometimes HR gets intervened in things that they shouldn't, and I think that that is also a problem that HR managers face with respect to their outward facing experience. So I mean, I've seen HR people for example, I saw one company, an HR person would review the arrests from the week from the weekly newspaper so they could see if employees had been arrested and then go through that. That's not really our job. It's a little ridiculous, but that is what happens often. Next up, out of DC, the question is whether or not they mentioned being fired from my last job in interviews. So they were fired because they did not correct their ADHD apparently, but ultimately they were terminated for not completing their work reliable and on time, and it got repetitive, and they procrastinated way too hard. In some interviews, he said that the contract was expiring, and that's why his contracting company wasn't recompeting for it, and as a result, that's why he left. And then in other interviews, he said that he was let go because he wasn't managing time well and learned a valuable lesson. Terrible answer. Just either A, leave off the job. Do not discuss the job that you're referring to. Do not engage it, and definitely don't say you're fired. It's a simple thing. Just say that you decided to go different ways because you had a different personality or something of that nature. Do not be too direct with respect to firing. It does put a black mark on your record, or black mark in your interview, and it's unlikely that it will be very successful for you. If you can, if the position is short enough, again, leave it off, but don't mention being fired. It's just a really bad idea. you can say something like, after some personnel shuffling, the job was no longer working out. So my boss and I agreed that it was time for me to move on to a position that was better suited to my skills, and I'm excited to get back to it. Make sure you leave emotion out. Don't badmouth your previous employer, and take responsibility for your part. The next one up is out of New York, and it's kind of long, so I'm not going to read all of it. But person is in biotech. They've been applying for jobs for 18 months. Think they've applied for 500 applications, or had 500 applications, and they have a master's, and their research is in biotech. They've gotten some interest, but they said that they asked for too much money. The candidate asked for too much money and didn't even counteroffer. And another offer, they got 3 rounds. They got 3 rounds through it and offered him $50,000. So a big difference. Based on the experience that he's articulated and everything else, it seems very much that he doesn't understand his market value in the market. He does have an MBA and he has some biotech experience. It looks like he's looking at remote positions. Right now, remote positions are few and far between. It's a bad idea to focus yourself on remote positions because they are just too competitive. There's too many people that are involved in it, and it's pretty tough. In addition, they're not really willing to move out of the metro area, but it's a pretty big metro area that shouldn't play too much of a role. Ultimately, when you have a problem, both of the problems for this candidate seem to stem from money, either too little for that person or too much, and they didn't even try to counter. And as a result, it seems like he's not listing himself at his true market value. I think he needs to get a better understanding of what his value in the market is, and what he can actually demand. And I get the feeling that he is not, he's asking for too much money, and as a result, the companies are just not biting. And in addition, with such few interviews, there's a good chance that he's probably applying for the wrong jobs and expecting a much greater move. A lot of people come out of MBA programs, and they really aren't fit for anything particularly significant. That's about it for human resources for the people today. I am going to go back into why most companies hate HR. I think it's worth doing a full interview or full discussion about this, and so that'll be probably coming in the coming weeks because I do think it's interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.